Hello and welcome to the June edition of the Hey Legal Social. We are live on YouTube and Twitter, and we are delighted that you are joining us tonight. Hello also to everyone who is joining us on Catch Up later on. And we know that there are quite a number of you that like to watch later on, so welcome to you as well. The Social is a live stream where we look to cover interesting legal stories, ones that you might talk to your colleagues or your friends about. So tonight, if you are interested in hearing about a criminal defence solicitor who is going to do a month-long solo show at the Edinburgh Festival, or a discussion about the Amber Heard Johnny Depp hearings, or from a consultant clinical psychologist on strategies to thrive as a lawyer, then we have you covered. And our first guest tonight is Abby Rawlings, who is a criminal defence solicitor. She is a comedian and she's a writer who will discuss her show. And then after that, I'm joined at around about 7:20 by Ruth Croman, who's managing partner of McNabb Solicitors. And then Lindsey Wilson, consultant clinical psychologist, will join me thereafter. And as always, we would love for you to get involved by sending comments or questions via live chat if you're watching on YouTube. So please do join in, send your questions, any comments, just fire them in for us as we go along. Thank you, as always, to our sponsors, De Novo, The Cash Room, Bundle Docs, and Law Scott CPD. So let's get started by bringing in our first guest, who is, as I said, Abby Rawlings. So welcome, Abby.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So, Abby, we haven't met until literally now, but I've read a lot about you, and you caught our attention because you not only are a criminal defence solicitor, but you've also got this show coming up. So I wonder, would you tell our viewers a bit about your story from the Magistrates Court as a criminal defence solicitor in the north of England to treading the boards at the festival in August?
Yeah, with pleasure. Well, as you say, I'm a criminal defence solicitor, legal aid lawyer mainly. I qualified in 1995, and as soon as I started practicing, it's like being on the set of a Mike Leigh film every day. You know what I mean? And my love affair is with TV, and I've written about the criminal justice system, but mainly the Magistrates Court, because it's a rich scene of dark, tragic comedy. Because TV is usually set in the Crown Court with the silk and the wigs and gowns. So I started the comedy in the aftermath of having a little bit of a disappointment with writing. So I Channel 4 commissioned a comedy drama, and with a production company called Vera Productions, we brought that to them. They commissioned the pilot, and it was doing very well. And we were very excited that it might get greenlit and we might have a comedy drama on our TV screens about the Magistrates Court. And then that commissioner left Channel 4, and it was inherited by someone else who obviously was not as emotionally invested in it. And unfortunately, that got shelved. So in the aftermath of that, which was a few years of writing, I had to channel my energies into something else, and comedy and stand-up. I mean, you could say being a criminal defence lawyer for nearly 30 years is a form of stand-up, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
From to Barnsley Magistrates, anyway. And comedy is just a great vehicle to, I think people have to be entertained if they're going to give you their ear about this subject. So it can't be a TED talk or some kind of lecture. You have to tickle their ears a little bit and sugarcoat the stories and the darker themes. But yeah, in Yorkshire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Manchester, Cheshire, I've been, going to pubs and clubs where your feet stick to the floor. My sessions for 2.5 years, and I didn't want to leave it another year before I tried the Fringe, and so it's a big deal for me.
Yeah.
And the support of the profession, it would be very much appreciated. I choose to take all that risk, but
Yeah, absolutely.
you know.
So what is it that you're hoping to achieve? Obviously, as you say, there are similarities between, I suppose, getting up in a court in a public place, speaking. That's the challenge maybe I do after dinner speaking, and I know that it's a challenge to try and make people laugh as well, but you're taking that on. But what is it that you're hoping to achieve by bringing your show to the festival?
Well, TV is my first love. So if I can, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, for example, her BAFTA-winning 2-series comedy drama Fleabag began as a one-woman stage play at the Fringe. So it's just about creating opportunities. So from a purely selfish point of view, it's cathartic. I am like everybody. I am sick to death of this narrative of despair within the profession. And I think a lot of people who choose to do stand-up, they do it, whether they're talking about mental health or their love life or whatever it might be, there's a form of catharsis in there, isn't there? But on another level, I want to, I know it sounds cliche, lift the lid on this backwater world. The Magistrates Court deals with, to finality, 96% of all criminal cases. It's a veritable reservoir of great storytelling. So you want to show people that, and maybe it'll lead to some opportunity either in TV, radio, or whatever. And not being conceited, if it can make a difference, like The Secret Barristers, the 3 books that he or she's written they're a clarion call, aren't they, to the British public and the government. They're part of a reform strategy. I mean, it's not proving successful at the moment, is it?
Yeah, I was going to say that because we've got obviously those in the profession will have heard of The Secret Barrister, and I can appreciate the writings, but how does your approach then differ? Because are you wanting to draw public attention to the difficulties that are in the system? Is it an educational purpose, or what is it? Or are there similarities with people like The Secret Barrister?
Well, I mean, all of the above. At its essence, legal aid criminal defence lawyers are on a trajectory to extinction.
Yeah.
And so in the Hour comedy, I do go through the etymology of how we got to be known as fat cats at a time. So we're the fat cat lawyer, and it's a myth, and I explain why it's a myth. Then we're on a critically endangered species list with the black rhino, and the green turtle and the whale, and I try to bring home to the audience, and I suppose the main difference between The Secret, and I'm not in competition, The Secret Barrister, all hands to the pump, come on, to harness whatever we've got, to try and change things, but we're trying to bring home to the audience that it's an investment, it's an insurance, isn't it, having a healthy criminal justice system? And we're on a trajectory to a point where there won't be anybody to get out of their bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to represent your son who's in for rape, or your mum. There won't be a specialist criminal advocate for your mum who's facing death by careless driving, which any driver could face at some point. So it's trying to do that without making the audience feel like they're being hit over the head with a mallet. Yeah. So there's a lot of lightness of touch. I would venture to say. A lot of my stuff is quite nuanced, and there's storytelling, and I try to introduce some of the worst aspects of the criminal justice system, like the appalling prison population, and the cost of incarcerating and warehousing human beings when it doesn't actually make us safer in society, and the human cost and the financial cost of that, how wasteful that is. I talk about the politics of penal populism, that a lot of these laws and policies are designed to win votes rather than make us safer. And that all sounds very, very serious, but it is tempered with some silliness and lightness of touch, and the hour, hopefully and you asked me what the main difference is to the Secret Bias. I suppose that the audiences that I have so far appeared in front of, with the odd exception, are not people who would reach for a book on the law or listen to a podcast on the law. So they're they're people that don't think about it. And if you can awaken something in them, and then people come up and say, not only was it funny, but it was really interesting, and it creates an awareness. I don't know. It might come to me, you know what I mean? You've got to try these things, haven't you?
I think that's right. I mean, I was in court the other day this week, and in the common room talking to colleagues, and we moan, and we've always, I guess lawyers have always moaned about something, but now we're moaning about something that really is worth, there are real problems. And I know south of the border, we've had various guests on here speaking about just how desperate the situation is. And, you're right, that public sympathy for lawyers, there isn't any, because they're not educated in it. So it's incredible that you're able to bring education, but utilizing something that's got a rich source of comedy. And I suppose it's dark comedy, and we use dark comedy as probably as a coping mechanism. And maybe Lindsey will talk about that later on. But that's a really smart way of going about it. But I can see lots of
I mean, the other obstacle is we're all suffering from compassion fatigue. We're all fed up. And, pandemics, wars, and inflation are not unique to our epoch. You just have to go back a short period in history, and it's there. But we're living through it now. So you've got that obstacle, and then an apathy with lawyers bleating on about their pay. But as I say, if you can make it live for them and make it real, and hopefully I've got a couple of clients, obviously that I've hidden their true identity, but all the stories are real, and by journeying through their story, hopefully people quickly become invested in the character. The stories are real, but the character's kind of fabricated, and it's just a vehicle to make people empathize at a time when we're all, these are challenging times, aren't we? So and all of that, I forget that I'm supposed to be having some fun as well. It's a big commitment, and there's been a lot of social media to do, and a good friend of mine who's a media guru is doing all that for me. So, we're crowdfunding it as well. I just thought I'd throw that one in. We're crowdfunding it because the cost is prohibitive, obviously.
I think that's a general, as you're saying that you're interested in TV and stuff, but there's a real interest by the general public in crime, and a bit of a mystery about courts. And yourself, when people come to court, they've seen something of it on the telly or a dramatization, and it's completely, it's totally different to what the reality is. But I just think it's a really novel approach to entertaining whilst educating people for a cause that, as you say, as this is heading in a deeply depressing direction, and nobody seems to be willing to address it in terms of government, or we've heard recently from an English barrister how the government are just not taking it seriously. So hopefully your approach will have an impact.
Hopefully. I mean, you spend 27 years hopefully acquiring a reputation as being a decent lawyer. Now I've announced myself as shit lawyer. So this time next year, I'm probably going to be unemployable, not doing stand-up, and destitute. So enjoy the moment. Let's enjoy the moment while we can.
Absolutely. I'm just drawing everyone's attention. We are at the bottom of the screen. The crowdfunding details are there for those who wish to get involved. How do we go about buying tickets, Abby? How would we get tickets to the show?
I'm glad you asked me that question, Edith. They came on sale on Thursday last week. So if you just go on the Ed Fringe website, and put in shit lawyer Abigail Rolling, because the two are now synonymous, unfortunately. They'll come up. Now the tickets are free, and then I've decided to go pay what you want. I can't charge legal aid lawyers a fee, can I? That would just be ridiculous. They're just as skinflint as the government is. So I think if they've enjoyed what they've heard, they'll put some money in a bucket, and that'll go to the cause. That'll keep me in cigs and gin of the festival. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what's been the response from colleagues so far?
Well, that's a good question, actually. In February, I had a very nice gig at Rotherham Civic, and there were about 140 people there, which is a big audience for me. This venue at Edinburgh has an audience, a capacity for 60, so it's a kind of nice, intimate, venue. And I was incredibly nervous because a lot of my colleagues were there, and a lot of court staff and security staff, and unfortunately, it went very, very well. And the guy hosting it gave me another 5 minutes, so I had nearly 20 minutes to do. He gave it me very late on, but being the professional that I am, I was able to do, and it went down well. So people are. I don't know how to describe what they are. They're a bit bewildered. They know my character, and I, the only way I've been able to get through the last 20 years is by making jokes about it, but commenting in a very dark, acerbic way about the way things run, and it just keeps me going, and it seems to keep a few other people going. Not everybody gets your humour, do they? And not everybody appreciates it, but so yeah, I've got a lot of support in principle, and those that can't come to Edinburgh can come and see me on tour. Yes, if that ever happens.
Absolutely. So is that your hope? Once you've got Edinburgh, that will then lead on to other things?
I genuinely, I'm not being obtuse, I genuinely have no idea. It could die a death. I am involved in a very nice writing project with Chris Lang at the moment, who wrote Unforgotten, and what was it, The Wife, The Thief, and The Canoe. So he's mentoring me on a legal drama at the moment, which I'm excited about. But again, TV land is brutal. I'm a new writer, and getting your foot in the door is quite difficult, and you need the rub of the green a little bit. So this is about making things happen for me. But again, I want to talk about something that you're passionate about and I'm passionate about, which is we went into this job with great ideals, and we're seeing standards diluted and normalized, and it absolutely breaks my heart. And we've just got to keep banging the drum, haven't we, in our respective ways, and wake up,
Yeah, because it's not just for our benefit, it's for society, and it's getting that message out there that, if you don't have a good legal system, it's the heart of a society that you have rules that are fair, and people are treated in a way that is fair. Otherwise, how can society as a whole function? It just can't. But until you need a lawyer, you're not interested usually. So all power to you, Abby. I'm really impressed that you are taking this on in such a novel way, and we absolutely wish you all the best with it. And let's hope you're back here in a few months to tell us how well it's gone, and to tell us about your upcoming ongoing shows. I think it'll be a wonderful success. I really hope you do well.
No, listen, I really appreciate your interest in it. It's been heartwarming, that, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you so much for coming on. And as I say, we hope to have you back. But for now, we are going to take a little break, and I'll be joined then by Ruth Croman and Lindsey Wilson to discuss the most talked about court hearings in years, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation hearings. So we'll see you shortly, and thank you again, Abby.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
As we emerge from the disruption of the past 2 years, join us at our in-house annual conference, where, over the course of 2 mornings, we'll discuss a variety of topics, all centred around our main themes of resilience and sustainability. To learn more, please visit our website.
We're back with Abby still with us. And Abby, you're absolutely welcome to stay if you want to join in.
Well,
Ali
I
is...
can't watch Coronation Street, but I will say.
Well, I think you have a lot to contribute. I'm just waiting on Ali to bring on the other guests. So Ruth and Lindsay should now be joining us. There's Ruth. Hello, Ruth.
Hi
Hello.
there.
And Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. How are you?
Hi, Edith. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. It was all a bit rushed at the start, so I haven't had a chance to say hello to anyone really, and that was all my fault. But anyway, we're all here now, and yeah, we're on to chat about televising of court hearings, and we've entitled it "Have We Heard Too Much?" And it seems that over the last few weeks and months, the world, I guess, has been gripped by this Amber Heard, Johnny Depp court hearing. So social media posts have been running into the billions, and it's really been like no other court hearing that we've ever seen before. And I guess it throws up a number of interesting points. Today, Amber Heard was quoted as saying that the way that the case was covered and played out on social media impacted on, she thinks, the jury decision and the way that they decided the case. And just to give you an understanding of the scale of the interaction with the evidence post on TikTok, with the hashtag Justice for Amber Heard, it received 92 million views. Was posts similar posts for Johnny Depp received 20 billion. It's just absolutely crazy. So on one level, I guess people can look at this and think, oh, it's trivial. But on another, it's certainly gripped people's attention and seems to be of immense importance to people. And it seems that it is impacting on justice, how courts and evidence are viewed. So, Ruth, let's come to you first of all. What do you make of it all?
Yeah, I think I was just absolutely astonished at the level of interest there was, and from really quite surprising people as well. Mm-hmm. So my husband was absolutely gripped by it and kept on showing me the latest meme for, what had come out that day, and snippets of particularly Amber Heard's evidence, I have to say. But the whole... I'm a family lawyer, first and foremost, and for me, it just seemed like, oh, here's another domestic abuse case, but obviously played out in a way bigger scale. But for me, I was just like, I don't want to watch this. This is just, the kind of, as I say, on a much bigger scale, but the bread and butter of, the dynamic of what's clearly a toxic relationship played out on this absolute world stage, and open to comment from everybody. Irrespective of what they actually know about the case, what they actually listen to. And then, that's then repeated and amplified on such a scale that I can well see why Amber Heard's saying, right, okay, well, it's, the social media gets out of control. But for me, that's the brakes, them's the brakes. If you have a litigation, you are not in control of that. That's a criminal litigation, that's a civil litigation, and there's a massive lesson to be learned, I think, for people going to the court, and a recognition that, once you step in that courtroom, you're not in control.
Absolutely, and I think there's that kind of. I was just going to say, if you were watching it, and it seemed almost intrusive to be watching such intimate details of their lives. But I guess that's what the purpose of the court was there to look at and to broadcast. But it's not just the watching of it, but it's the comments and these experts, TikTok experts, and people picking out particular pieces of evidence. Because I dare say, if you sat in the courtroom and watched the whole thing from beginning to end, it might not have been quite as entertaining, rather than little TikTok videos. So I guess, Ruth, can you see it? Can you see that sort of thing coming to Scotland, or should it?
Well, I really, really, really hope not. I think there's a massive push, certainly in the courts in England just now, and particularly the family courts, about transparency of judgments and decision making. And there's a really good project there called the Transparency Project that I would, urge people to go and investigate and have a look at. And that's all about, trying to burst the bubble of what happens in a family court, for example, and what kind of what lies behind the decision making. All for projects like that, because it's really carefully controlled and managed, and the judge makes sure that everything's completely anonymized, but still a lot of detail provided. So that kind of project I think is great, but I'm really wary of effectively cases which are so significant for people, and these are people's lives at the end of the day being judged in the court of public opinion rather than by a judge or by a sheriff, because I think we can see the impact it's had on Amber Heard. Now, she's maybe not a particularly sympathetic character, and I think there's probably lots of comments that all of us could make about her credibility and her apparent complete lack of insight as to why the jury decided as they did. But you can't help feeling sorry for her that her whole life is being unpicked on this global stage. And I have to say, just when I was talking earlier about the sort of the dynamic of a toxic relationship like that you see on a day-to-day basis in your work as well, I can't help it just leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth that the whole process was used as a bit of a platform by Johnny Depp to humiliate her, to exact revenge. Is that really what we want our courts to be doing? Don't know.
Good question. And I guess, Abby, what are your views on it? Do you think there should be more of it, or is it something that cheapens the court process?
I don't think there's anything about the American legal system that we would want to emulate, to be honest. Apart from we've lost the right to silence, the Scots haven't, but that's the only thing. I didn't follow it, not out of any kind of supercilious reason. I just didn't find time to follow it. But I find the developing attention of media and social media on these things corrupting. I think it's like a beauty contest. And I was reminded of the Amanda Knox trial, in Italy, the media circus around that. Cameras in inquests, and I think the Court of Appeal that was live streamed yesterday. That's interesting. I like that. It's an inquisitorial approach, a fact-finding approach, rather than a media circus. I watched Newsnight the night of the verdict, and actually they had a American libel lawyer on pointing out that Amber Heard's article, which triggered that court hearing, which didn't name Johnny Depp, but was so explicit as to who it was about, she made it almost inevitable that he would have to sue her. And I thought that was quite interesting. But notwithstanding that, I find the whole thing quite disgusting. The camera in her face all the time, and the sound bites that came through my Instagram were all against her. And I can't comment on the trial because I didn't watch any of it. But our interest in it, I find it's almost reflective of a spiritual impoverishment in society. I don't mean a religious impoverishment, but there's a reason why the Jeremy Kyle show got cancelled ultimately. There's something really base and disgusting and corrupting about it. And, lawyers and judges playing up to cameras. My view, as you might have gathered, is that we shouldn't emulate that. I'm all in favour of transparency, but there was a time when school kids used to come and sit at the back of the magistrates' court and watch what happened. But of course, in England and Wales, 51% of magistrates' courts have been closed. So kids or people doing their Duke of Edinburgh award who want to sit in a magistrates' court may have to travel over 50 miles now. And to be honest, if they wanted to sit in my local one, I'd be a little bit embarrassed about the state of it. It's covered in black and yellow hazard warning tape. at the moment. So that's my humble view on the subject. Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so are the public allowed back in at the moment, Abby, into English and Welsh courts? Are they?
The public hearings, the justice should not only be done, but it should be manifestly be seen to be done.
Yeah, no, I know that, but in terms of COVID regulations, are they now allowed back in?
Oh yeah, I mean, they sort of jet wash you with, antiseptic spray, but they do that in Barnsley anyway, wherever you go. So that's
I guess though, one argument for having them televised would be, well, the public courts anyway, anyone can go into the back of a court, but the reality is the public benches are empty, aren't they? So why, it just seems a bit weird that people are all over social media commenting on it when they wouldn't take the time to actually get up off their backsides and go physically to the court to watch it. It's this kind of sensationalism, I think, that both of you have been speaking about.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's also the issue. I mean, it's one thing, as you say, getting your backside or, on the bus, go and sit in the back of the court and listen to what's going on if it's a particularly salacious case. But then if it's public, if it's televised or live streamed, whatever, then there's you can't control what people do with that live stream and, the snippets of that or the content of that. And that, you just think, actually, we need to fundamentally have a respect that these are people's lives. Yes, it might be, for want of a better word, a complete shit show. But, but really, actually, does that mean that, you're entitled to almost perpetuate the abuse, whichever team you were on? It just leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. I didn't like the dynamic of it. Anyway, and I was far from following it, religiously. But you just, if you were on social media, even if you're looking at the BBC News website, they seem to have daily updates, and you just think, really, is this, given all the rest that's happening in the world just now, really?
Absolutely.
But then there are others who seem to be, absolutely glued to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely glued.
Yeah. Lindsey, I'll bring you in at this stage. What's your view about how that sort of, a court case on such personal matters could affect someone psychologically if they're, not only are they going through the trauma of that, but it's been broadcast, and then you've got on top of that, you've got people commenting on it on social media in a kind of very flippant way with very strong views. How might that affect people?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was surprised as well, or maybe naively surprised, the extent to, when you mentioned the figures, the millions and billions of people that were glued to this and had an opinion on it. And, not that I followed this case religiously or, watched it frequently. I was aware of the highlights, and some of those details are extremely sordid and humiliating. And, even if so I think I'd read somewhere that, was it Johnny Depp who deliberately chosen to hold the hearing, the proceedings in a particular state in the US where they do allow cameras. So there was obviously a reason for that. There was a motive for him doing that. He wanted the world to see that, obviously knowing that there would be elements of his behavior that were going to be laid bare. And for him, obviously, that was worth it, if you like. So, I mean, I don't know whether or not Amber Heard had to consent to that, to taking place in a state where it would be televised. But I think for both of them, there were times where I was aware of forums and comments where people were commenting basically that neither of them are coming out well in this show, if you like. It's, like someone mentioned earlier, that it seems quite intrusive, knowing that level of detail about a couple's relationship and why it went wrong and where it went wrong and what they did. I mean, I can imagine, particularly because Amber lost the case, that, the effects of this will probably be quite far reaching on her mental health, particularly not just the immediate aftermath, but the repercussions on her career even, and what that will do to her mental health. Because, Hollywood, it's a fair weather friend, really, the industry. And, if there's any scandal attached to actors, or if they're on the bad side, they're very quickly dropped. So, it'll be interesting to see how things pan out. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know in future as well, in hindsight, would Johnny Depp have done the same thing again and televised it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very a very relevant point. I think I read Amber Heard saying that, she made comment that he's a great actor. So perhaps in hindsight, she maybe wouldn't have agreed to, if she was, I don't know the system either, whether she would have had to consent to where it was going to be. But I'm also thinking about, in terms of people giving evidence, so going to court as a witness is nerve-wracking enough, but if someone knows that they are, going to be beamed across the world, I don't know, Ruth, have you got any thoughts on how a witness might be affected by that?
Well, absolutely. If you think those of us who are in the courts routinely, it does become like your second home. It doesn't faze you going to a court, or when you've got a big case. Yeah, of course you still have your butterflies that that are there. But whenever you speak to a client who's not familiar with that environment, and this is in your divorce case or your child arrangements case, your clients are absolutely beside themselves because they've got no idea what to expect. And so much of our job then is trying to set the scene for them and trying to reassure them and just get them through it. And so you kind of think for something on that scale, it must have been absolutely terrifying. And you do wonder when you see people that are torn apart by very effective cross-examination as well. But you do wonder, particularly when that's been so widely viewed, does that make people worry even more about coming to give evidence and go into the witness box? That can't be a good thing. Like you were talking about earlier with Abby, from a society as a whole, if people feel that's the kind of experience that they're going to have if they come into the court. Now, we all know that's, thankfully not the kind of experience that's routinely seen, certainly in the Scottish courts. But, there is a blurring of the lines, I think, particularly when people see it, if it's on the internet, then it must be real. We know that. And I think there's a real danger to that as well.
Absolutely.
It's a bit like the Prince Andrew interview with Emily Maitlis. There are certain people in life who are slightly indulged or myopic about their own sense of importance, and they've been very badly advised, haven't they? Prince Andrew was very badly advised to enter into that interview, and I think Johnny Depp and people and Amber Heard, I don't think they're getting great advice about what the article that precipitated it and all the rest of it. So that's one issue. But the issue about whether we should have cameras in our criminal courts or civil courts is a separate issue. And I think, people who live that life and then act in a certain way almost bring it on themselves. Do you know what I mean? That this is the society that we live in. If you're going to play dangerous and close to the fire, then you might get burned. But in terms of criminal proceedings, well, I obviously think in terms of criminal proceedings in Great Britain, I would absolutely hate to see it. It's disgusting, and it's not. It shouldn't be part of our. It's not British.
I guess the other thing that sprung to my mind, Abby, was, witnesses and jurors aside, what about lawyers? You're thinking it's bad enough preparing for a cross-examination or for any case, a speech or whatever you're doing, but to think that was then going to be broadcast and then open for scrutiny, how would that make you feel as a lawyer?
I totally hate it. I mean, my trials are really boring anyway. No, but trials are really boring things. They very rarely produce any exciting moments, unless something stupid happens, like the photocopier doesn't work or something. That's the most interesting thing. The heating. In my court, the cells are Arctic and the courtroom is tropical. So that those are the most exciting things because our heating system's buggered. The trials are very, very boring things, and the concern is that people who if it's televised, they'll just tap into, as Ruth said, this little sound bites that may give them. I mean, at the moment, we don't have cameras in the criminal courts, and the Contempt of Court Act is routinely breached, isn't it? There's lots of case law of cases that have to be aborted and rerun. So we're on a hiding to nothing. It's probably better that the public don't realise just how dull it all is.
Well, I mean, we have had in Scotland in the criminal courts sentences, diets of sentence being broadcast if there's a public interest. But I guess that's very controlled, and as I say, it's a public interest issue after maybe a long running high profile trial where cameras have come in, and that's been quite novel. And I guess maybe going back to Abby, your hope of educating the public and drawing people in to let them see what goes on in court, that could be a good thing. But I take all of your points that this kind of sensationalism and voyeurism almost of other people's lives being put in that kind of forum, it can't be a good thing. And just my final question really is that the purpose of courts, to be serving up entertainment? Ruth, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely not. Certainly not deliberately. As obviously provided fodder for Abby's show, and many a tale around the agent's room when you just think we've got to find some humour in this crazy situation. But no, I mean, and we can't, without it sounding like a jurisprudence lecture, back to first year at uni. That's not the purposes of our courts, and it can't be. And I'm conscious, for example, the Supreme Court is quite regularly televised, I think, every time they're sitting as well, but that's dull. Unless you've got a particular interest in a tax issue, which seems to be the vast majority of the cases there, it cannot be the purpose of entertainment. Otherwise, we do end up, as Abby's saying, down the Jeremy Kyle rabbit hole. And that's just cannot be good for anyone. We have to remember these are real people. These are real people's lives. I think particularly in talking about publicising or televising criminal courts. What about the opportunity for redemption? If you're found guilty in one case, but there is evidence of that, and for example, the complainers kept that evidence and uses it and embarks on a campaign. Just no, sorry.
Yeah. You could see all sorts of cans of worms being opened, couldn't you?
Well, and we have a free press. We can read about it if we're interested. And if that's, it depends what you read. If you read certain sections of the media, you'll just get this diatribe of nonsense, if that's what you want to fester on. But you'll just fester on, Facebook posts that flatter what you want to, that feed into your confirmation bias anyway. So we should stick to what we're good at. We've got an excellent free press, and I'm going to shut up now on that.
Not at all. It's been a great discussion. So thank you everyone very much. I'm just keeping my eye on the time because time flies on here. So next up, we're going to move on and have a chat with Lindsey, and we're going to be covering lawyer well-being, something we have covered in the past on Hey Legal Social, given how important it is to us all. But more from Lindsey on that after the short break. And Abby and Ruth, you are most welcome to stay on with us, and I'm sure you'll contribute and benefit from it too. But we'll take a short break just now. Thank you so much all for your discussion.
Thank you.
This year's Sole Practitioner and High Street Firm Conference is designed to provide you with essential practice updates, key insights, and of course, a forum for questions and discussions. Join us across 2 mornings to hear from our panel of leading Sole and High Street experts and to connect and network with your peers. For more information and to book your place, please visit our website.
So welcome back, everyone. Lindsey, as I said at the start, is a clinical psychologist. We're really grateful to you, Lindsey, for agreeing to come on. Well-being for lawyers is something that we are very focused on. We've discussed it in the past. We've looked at different ways of trying to have good mental well-being, but to have someone with your qualifications and expertise is a real benefit. And certainly at the Faculty of Advocates, we've had some very harrowing times of late, and just tragic circumstances, which leads us all, I think, just to revisit where we're at, why mental well-being is perhaps dipping. There are huge pressures on lawyers at the moment. So really what I was wanting to ask you, Lindsey, is when people are busy and they've got challenging work, what signs are there that things are perhaps starting to get affected, mental health starting to become affected? What are the signs of that?
Well, I mean, for every individual, it'll be different, someone's response. But, I suppose one of the markers is, when there's a change in behavior, or if they're maybe spending more time at work and they're not seeing their family, or they're not at home as much more. And again, it can present in different ways according to the individual, even the gender they are. So, males might become more angry or irritable, for argument's sake. But, you could get someone that's just frequently finding that they are missing deadlines, or they're just not performing, and it might become a performance issue before it becomes obvious that there's a well-being concern around it. I mean, some of it depends on the type of stress, I suppose, that someone's facing. But usually someone will feel the impact of stress where the resources that they have to meet the demands, there's just a lack of them, whether that's the mental resources, the emotional resources, financial, and so on and so forth. But, the hallmark is really a change in how this person is usually behaving, acting, performing. And it can actually be quite a long time, all depending on their willingness to seek help, before somebody's distress comes to the attention of someone else who can help. So, a lot of the time you might find that it's maybe the straw that broke the camel's back, and then it uncovers a whole host of other difficulties, whether that's work-related or home-related. So, yeah, it can be very difficult to detect, but it's definitely something worth looking out for, particularly in professions like yours, the legal profession, where you're dealing with such disturbing material and cases on a routine basis, I imagine. And I think you and I obviously had spoke about this a bit before, Edith, and I was surprised to learn that it doesn't sound like there's any kind of formal supervision or formal debrief where you're able to kind of offload about difficult cases that you might be handling at that point in time.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the offloading came certainly before lockdown. It came by just going into the common room and just, I suppose, going back to my discussion with Abby, where you go in and you moan about something, or you just start talking it out. But it's, and as you say, the subject matter of a lot of what we deal with is not something you can then just go home and offload to someone else, because it's just, it's subject matters that other people are not really wanting to hear about, nor should they be exposed to it. And if Lindsey, somebody feels like you're saying missing deadlines, or there's these little indicators to them or to others, what then should someone that's having these issues, what would you recommend they do at that point? Would it be to get counselling or offload in some way?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that depends on the culture and the tone that is set by the industry they work in or their employer. A lot of that comes from the top down. So my employer is very proactive. We have a lot of web pages on managing stress, on workplace stress, on just well-being, mental health awareness week. It's everywhere, and there's proactive attempts to reduce the stigma of mental health difficulties. So someone's willingness to hold their hand up and ask for help will determine on those above them and the culture around them. So for instance, if you work in a culture where you really are expected to persevere without flagging anything if you're stressed about something, then you're going to try and hide it to the best of your ability, or you might even try and deny or minimize it or deal with it in unfortunate maladaptive ways of coping. Substance abuse, working excessive hours, those are very typical behaviors. So I think a lot of it really has to come from the employer or the culture that someone's working in. There has to be more open conversation and encouragement about people coming forward if they're experiencing stress and if they're concerned about their well-being, because until they're kind of given that permission and the green light, there's going to be that fear of negative repercussions on their career, for instance.
Absolutely. And certainly, I've just got a new puppy. That's what that noise is. So excuse her. Let's just hope that doesn't get any worse. I was just going to say, since events at faculty, it's certainly been discussed more, and we've been alerted to various resources that we can utilise. But Ruth, I might bring you in here, and just could you maybe talk about how you look after your staff within your company?
Yeah, I think just really trying to recognise what Lindsey says. I recognise the pressure that there has always been, I suppose, but has been particularly exacerbated, or it's become particularly acute over the last couple of years, and trying to create a culture that it's okay to talk, and trying harder than I think we ever did back in 2019 or before then, of checking in with people and making sure that we have that check-in every day. It might just be for 5 minutes, but so that nobody feels isolated, or we're not a big organisation. There's about 40 of us all together, but trying to create that from the top down, that culture of you can talk about this. We know it's a hard job, and we all recognise it's a hard job. No one's pretending that they're Superwoman or Superman and can do it all, and everything's tickety-boo, and being, I think, just trying to be honest about your own experiences, and yep, we all have hard days, we all have hard weeks, and talking about it, and trying to provide some kind of platform that you can, even between departments, just talk about different cases, because I think we all have cases that get to you particularly, and you do your best to be professional. You obviously, part of your job is to be really objective, but there's always cases that get to you, and just learning and trying to support junior members of staff in processing that, so that they don't get bogged down, I think is pretty important.
Absolutely. Abby, what about you? What do you do to stay well?
Laugh as much as possible at myself. No, it's a very there's no silver bullet really for it in our profession. It's very labour intensive, our work, isn't it? Because you get somebody arrested at 3 different police stations, and you've got to cover 4 courts. You need people, and I've worked for some wonderful people, but at the end of the day, the only way I could cope in my work was eventually to end full-time salaried employment, and I went freelance about 10 years ago, so that I gave myself the capacity to be able to say no to things, and that's not to, I think if Ruth's managing people and managing a firm, you've got incredible pressures, but I just think from a purely selfish point of view, I just had to bring some control to my work-life balance, and not be on call for a week, not going to the magistrates court, preparing for the Crown Court, being a duty solicitor and being on call at the weekend. The only way I could control that was to stop being a salaried employee. And I'm not suggesting everybody just become freelance, There is no silver bullet for it, because there isn't a massive pool of people to employ. Firms are running on a less than 5% profit margin. So I take my hat off to anybody who's running and managing a law firm at the moment, because it must be incredibly difficult.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The pup's now getting louder, so I'm going to pose another question to you, Lindsey, and I'm going to go and get her out. She's in a crate at the moment. Not being cruel to her. She's just in the crate. I think she's hungry. Lindsey, what you have a challenging job. What do you do to stay well? How do you've spoken a little bit about, you've got strategies in place and your employer's ensuring that, but what do you do to stay well? And I'll be back in a second. Keep talking.
Yeah. So within our profession, I suppose we're fortunate in that it's been recognised for a long time that you need what we call clinical supervision. And that's a private, confidential space where you would take cases once a month, cases that maybe you have a question about for a kind of governance check to make sure you're following an ethical and effective treatment plan. But it's also the space to share with a colleague who's in the same or similar profession to you, if there is a difficult case, and if there's what in particular is difficult about it, whether or not it resonates with people you know or experiences you've been through, or just the level of trauma that they've been through, for instance, at a human level, you have a lot of empathy for that. So, peer supervision or clinical supervision is essential, really, to managing your well-being, as is, like you were saying earlier, Edith, it's the kind of ad hoc opportunities where you're just having a chat with your colleagues who work in the same line as you. So when you talk about a case that someone else has experience of, I don't mean that specific client, but the theme, then you don't have to worry about, is this too much information for this person to contain? Am I going to upset them by, talking just about the impact of this? Or, and you won't get that. You can't get that at home, presumably because, well, there'll be client confidentiality, but also because, you don't want to burden those that are close to you, because they're not conditioned to kind of accommodating that kind of information, which can often be really disturbing. So, and as Abby mentioned earlier, where you can have control. So things like being boundaried about your working hours, making sure that when you have finished at the end of the day, you're not going back to your laptop or your phone. You're very much compartmentalizing your homework, your home life and your work life. And sometimes that people can do things deliberately to make that transition. So it might be changing out of your clothes and putting on your tracksuit bottoms and hoodie, I don't know. Or it might be going for a run or doing something that you enjoy, just to kind of create that divide between these two environments. So it's just, for what works for everyone is going to be different, and it's also going to depend on what is the art of the possible within your profession, whether you're employed or you're freelance or whatever. But yeah, I'd say one of the most effective ways of managing the stress of our job in my profession would be clinical supervision, and just the ad hoc opportunities to speak to other colleagues kind of in the moment, even, because clinical supervision is scheduled at a specific time, and that might not be in the moment when you're going through something stressful and just want to pick up the phone, say, this just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see that, that definitely, and then that's almost just you've let it out, and then you can then move on from it. But I think Abby's point as well about taking control, or controlling what you can control, because a lot of the time you can feel a bit hopeless, or things can be so overwhelming, but there is still areas that you can control within that, and it's just recognizing it and recognizing your limits, and that we're not robots. We need downtime, we need rest. It's not a weakness to say I can't cope with this. It's actually a strength to recognize it and deal with it. So thank you. I've just noticed the time. The time has flown. Thank you all so much. This has been such an interesting chat. And I'm sure we could keep going for some time yet. But you've been all very generous with your time and your thoughts. And really, it's made for a really interesting discussion this evening. So thank you all so very much. And that is it for the Hey Legal Social this month. Thank you to all of you for watching, to our guests, to our sponsors. And we hope you enjoy this episode and enjoy being part of the Hey Legal community. So thank you again to my guests, and all take care, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.